We're honored to have Adam Gold here. He's a PhD candidate at Missouri, and the focus of his talk will be how to realign the incentive structure to prevent teams from tanking. So join me in welcoming Adam Gold. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordy, for the warm introduction. The way that draft order is determined is a statistical method that directly affects the way that the game is played. Yet we have been led to believe that the best way to determine draft order is by using the reverse standings, where teams that acquire the most losses during the regular season have the best chance at getting the best picks to get the best players. This creates an inherent incentive for teams to intentionally handicap themselves in an effort to get those better picks. But before I continue, please let me pause to thank the Evolution of Sports team for giving me an opportunity to present at this year's conference. My name is Adam Gold, and I believe that maintaining fan interest in their favorite teams and holding franchises accountable for a justifiable level of success is more important than the attempt to list teams from worst to first. In a way, the season ends once teams can no longer win a championship. Yet fans are still asked to pay a premium to go and see their favorite teams perform. In an attempt to inspire fans to maintain interest, passion, and optimism in their favorite teams, while still giving the worst teams that need the most help the best picks to get the best players, I respectfully propose that draft order should be determined based on how teams perform after becoming mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. Consider the performance after mathematical elimination. This is the 2010 NHL draft, where the 14 teams that did not make the playoffs are listed in their draft order, where Edmonton received the first overall selection after the 2010 NHL draft lottery. I would then use advanced mathematical combinatorics and rigorous computer algorithms to determine the exact date when teams become mathematically eliminated. I have a program that will determine if there's a combination of games that will allow a specified team to make the playoffs. If no such combination of games are found, I determine and conclude that that team is mathematically eliminated. Consider their performance after mathematical elimination. The Edmonton Oilers play 14 games and acquire 13 points, 2 points for each of their 6 wins, 0 points for their 7 losses in regulation, and 1 point for their only overtime loss. I would then sort these teams based on the way that the NHL determines their standings in preference for the teams that perform best after becoming mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. After sorting the teams based on performance after mathematical elimination, the Edmonton Oilers retain the first overall draft pick. Notice that there is a good cluster of teams that range from 3 to 5 points. There would have been a tremendous amount of competition between these teams in an effort to acquire a higher draft pick. How do you think that performance over time among the recent seasons since the lockout would look? Do you think that the teams that are in the middle, perhaps the teams at the end, would have the advantage? If we consider the recent seasons since the lockout, I conclude that the teams that are in need of the most help would get the best picks. Consider the linear regression where we have on the x-axis the reverse standings and on the y-axis the mathematical elimination draft orders. There is a linear trend that relates the reverse standings to the mathematical elimination draft orders that suggests that the teams that need the most help do, in fact, acquire the best picks. There is one specific leverage point that I'd like to identify, and that comes from the 2011 NHL draft, where the team that would have finished 11th would have received the first overall pick. And I'd like to take a moment and explain why. This is the performance after elimination among the 2011 picks. The St. Louis Blues outperformed the system and acquired the top draft pick. And the reason why is because many of these teams are not performing to their potential. From these 14 teams, I consider their performance before elimination. These teams, before becoming eliminated, have a winning percentage of 45%. After elimination, their winning percentage drops to 28%. This is a 36% decline in their performance after elimination, which is statistically significant. And because of this, I would conclude and reward that the St. Louis Blues would be deserving of the first overall draft pick and deserving of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. What do you think the overall league change is between these professional sports leagues? The NHL decreases in performance by 16% after elimination. We have a drop of 14% for the NBA, about very little change in Major League Baseball, and a drop by 6% in the NFL. Let's move on to the NBA. This is just a point in time that I consider for the NBA where I'm looking at their performance before elimination, and I sort these teams based on the games that they have remaining after becoming mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. What I can do is I can determine their expected wins, just using a very straightforward calculation, just their winning percentage before elimination times the remaining games played. I can then determine the expected number of wins for each of these teams. Very easy to do. And there are more advanced ways to do it. But for just the straightforward way to do it, you can see that there is a correlation between the teams that are worst and the expected wins before and after elimination. Consider their performance after elimination. The Sacramento Kings are outperforming the system. They go 9-11. Out of 20 games, they win 9. If they performed this way before elimination, they could have contended for a draft pick, or contended for a playoff spot, pardon me. The Minnesota Timberwolves did not perform well. They go 2-19, or 2-17 for over 19 games. And then based on this, I would then sort the teams based on performance after elimination, and the Sacramento Kings are awarded the first overall draft pick. And then the Minnesota Timberwolves would be punished. You can no longer go 10% winning percentage after elimination. I would like to propose that perhaps my model is better at identifying which team needs the most help and gives more help to those teams. For the NBA draft order, we also see that there is a linear trend among the reverse standings and the mathematical elimination draft orders, where the teams that perform worst do get the best draft picks based on the winning after elimination. How do you think Major League Baseball looks? We have the same linear trend. There's a little bit more variability because you had a playoff system where there was only one wild card. And that explains the leverage point at the very bottom right, where you see the San Francisco Giants from 2004 that are able to jump ahead and get the first overall draft pick because they were a great team and they became eliminated too early. But now with the new Major League Baseball playoff system that was adapted last night, you would have less outliers, less leverage points, and you would be able to identify the worst teams better by readjusting the playoff structure from the Major League Baseball. The NFL does not have this preferred linear trend with the slope of about 1. We see almost a horizontal line, which indicates that there isn't a strong trend in favor of the teams that need the most help getting the best help after becoming mathematically eliminated. And the reason why is because Major League Baseball, or NFL teams, pardon me, are only playing a handful of games after elimination. Now, the storyline for the NFL in Week 17 was between the Indianapolis Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The storyline was that if Indianapolis won, they lost the first overall draft pick. What I am proposing for the NFL to consider is that only the first overall pick would be awarded to teams after performance after elimination. So the storylines and the fans were suggesting that the Indianapolis Colts should throw the game and lose. Keep the game close, but don't win. Make it seem like we could have won, but don't win so we can suck for luck. This is how performance after elimination looks. The Indianapolis Colts would have retained the first overall draft pick, and the game between Indianapolis and Jacksonville would have been the decisive game in determining who picked first overall. The Indianapolis Colts, if they win, get the first overall draft pick. If they lose, they can still get the first overall draft pick, but they need help. And there would have been a possibility that that game between Indianapolis and Jacksonville would have been played for the first overall draft pick. That ticket could have been just as hot as the Super Bowl ticket in Indianapolis. So, I have a question. Would you rather sit in a good seat where the loser moves up in draft order? Or would you rather sit further back, where the winner would be able to move up the draft order? There are no more easy games for teams trying to clinch a playoff spot or move up in the standings or clinch home ice advantage or home field advantage. You are playing against teams that are trying to improve for the future at your expense. Players are competing for a future teammate. The Cold War between rivalries within conferences and divisions is over. You don't need to have two teams that are very good to be updating that rivalry over time. You can have games where the team is trying to move into the top 5, playing against a team that's trying to move up in the playoff system. These games will be occurring on a nightly basis. Fan interest in their favorite teams will extend to beyond what their team is doing, and they will look at all of the other teams that are performing on every single night and see how those games can impact their team and their draft order. There aren't enough analysts in this building to cover all of the potential storylines that can unfold as teams become eliminated and compete for draft order. However, all of those storylines have one major theme: win. Win at any cost. Do whatever it takes to win every single game. Now, to prevent teams on the verge of elimination from trying to lose to become eliminated and compete for draft picks, I'm recommending an additional change. Change the trade deadline. Instead of having one fixed time where no teams can trade after that period, make it so that once you're eliminated, you cannot trade, nor can you have waiver priority. Once you're eliminated and you compete for the draft picks, you can no longer improve your team. This triggers an incredible economic change in the landscape of sports, that once you're eliminated, you can no longer improve your team, and we have a basic principle of supply and demand become applied, where the teams that become eliminated lose their right to trade, and the teams that are in the middle have a lot of power because the supply of players is down and the demand is increased dramatically. If these are indeed my 15 minutes of fame, and I never get another opportunity to present at a conference that has the prestige of the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, please let me state how proud I am to have spent these moments presenting enriching research that has the potential to initiate an era where teams make their pursuit of winning a limited. Fans within communities, fans across sports, fans among cities can unite together for one common purpose. We should never have to consider that a loss can be more helpful than a win. My name is Adam Gold, and I pledge that mathematics will never limit our passion for sports. I would like to invite questions.
I'm a little worried that with this setup, you've just shifted the incentive to lose from the end of the season to the beginning of the season. So because of the following, imagine with the Detroit Pistons this year, they enter the season knowing they're going to be bad. This is my team. I'm happy for them to lose, so they improve their draft position. In your system, what I would like them to do is get eliminated as quickly as possible so that they have the most time to win games in order to be at the top of the playoff eliminated rankings. So I think that that's what's showing up in your graphs. The reason that the best teams are being, or the worst teams are being rewarded still in the draft is because they're being eliminated first.
This game theory that supports this is that teams have the idea that at some point during the season, they have to win. And from a purely theoretical standpoint, and game theory suggests that teams would try their best to improve their team and that they would try to win every game of the season. They have to have some sort of level of success. The minimum salary cap in the NHL, for example, is $48.3 million. Is that can fans have some sort of an idea that every team should have the capacity to win any given game? And I think that the idea is teams would prefer to make the playoffs than to get a higher draft pick and try to win early. But thank you for the question. It's a great question.
Adam, over here in the back left.
Yes, sir.
I thought that was very thought-provoking. Thanks a lot for the presentation. I guess One thing that I kind of sit here thinking about as a potential, mitigant for why this system might not work is just the scheduling and, kind of who you're playing at the end of the season. So, you take two NFL teams, for example, they both go 2-11, and then one team has to play the Patriots, the Saints, and the Packers, and the other team has to play the Bills, the Jaguars, and the Rams. And, Team 2 obviously has a much better opportunity to kind of get the first pick versus the other team who's very likely to go 0-3.
There's a bigger problem that the teams that are trying to make the playoffs are playing against teams that aren't performing at the level that they're capable of. And with my method, we fix the scheduling problem with the playoff system, and the draft order is essentially the noise gets clustered into the draft order. You're right. Yes, sir.
I see one other problem with this methodology. I like the research. I like what you're doing here. The problem is, what if you're a decent team that just barely doesn't make the playoffs? You get a good draft pick. What if you're a really crappy team? You get a really crappy draft pick. So you aren't you're bolstering the power of the middle at the expense of the really, really, really bad teams.
I believe that there is a minimum level of success that we can expect from teams, that you're paying a premium price to go and see these teams perform, and that we can hold these teams accountable for a justifiable level of success.
The problem is sometimes that player doesn't exist. Sometimes the team just bad. It just doesn't work that way in real life sometimes. That you have a team like the Leafs this year that are going to barely miss the playoffs, but we get a really good draft pick at the expense of a team that's really, really garbage that gets a middle of the range draft pick. What I'm doing is I'm taking that 8th seed or 9th seed or 10th seed and pushing them right up into the 3rd and 4th, and those guys that are at 16, 17 are going right down to the bottom. Maybe I missed it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. The performance isn't weighted by winning percentage. It's sorted by total wins after elimination. And so the teams that are really bad have more games to earn those wins. There are other ways to help besides giving away the first pick.
I wasn't clear on your answer to the first question, so I'd like to for you to answer that again, is why wouldn't a bad team, I've talked to GMs and they know certain years they're not going to make the playoffs. Why wouldn't they start losing right away and then try to win later? Can you just repeat that again? And then also, what other unintended consequences have you thought through, and then could you answer those yourself?
Sure. So let me give you specific examples of teams that were on the verge of elimination and then made the playoffs. The most recent example that comes to mind are the St. Louis Cardinals. We saw the Washington Capitals do that a few years ago, and then the St. Louis Blues were last in the league in February of 2009 and ended up making the playoffs. What I'm contending is that teams will try their best to win even before elimination, and that they don't have to try to tempt the system.
Finish out of the playoffs a lot earlier or later than others. Is there a process of weighting the fact that maybe one of those teams like Houston only played 2 games after they were eliminated, as opposed to another team that like Sacramento that played 20? Is there any way to weight that as well?
You could play around with the system. However, I think that keeping it simple for the fans to understand is the best method.
Right here.
Which team in pro sports in the last 3 or 4 years has been the biggest tanker of them all, would you say?
Ooh, that's a great question. Can I get back to you on that? Can I give you my information and get back to you?
I'm writing an article for tomorrow.
Oh, I can get that information for you in 10, 15 minutes. All right, thanks.
All right, let's thank Adam again one more time.
Thank you.